Welcome to the Reptiles and Research podcast.
In today's episode, we have Jamie from the Norwich Reptile Shed, who came on to talk about his huge 30-foot reptile room with his ginormous Royal Python enclosure. Now we get into the culture of Royal Python keeping, the challenges he faced setting this up, the negative reaction he may have faced setting up this floor-to-ceiling Royal Python enclosure, and what's happened since doing that. We also go into some of his other philosophies around what reptile keeping means to him, how it makes him feel, and what else he's got planned for the new YouTube channel, the Norwich Reptile Shed. If you would like to support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/reptilesandresearch. On there, you can submit your questions ahead of time for us to give to the guests to be included in the episode. Also, we are revamping the structure and the foundations around that, so there's plenty of new things that we haven't disclosed yet that are coming. So if you want to get involved in that, head on over there. But without further ado, welcome Jamie. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Jamie. This is obviously Jamie of Norwich Reptile Shed. The first thing that I wanted to address, obviously, is that this is a reptile shed, but you didn't always keep this way. So how long have you been keeping reptiles before you got to this ultimate climax?
I'd say about, firstly, hi, how you doing? I'd say about 20 years, give or take. Started keeping reptiles in my bedroom as a kid when I lived at my mum and dad's, and just had animals off and on back then. Some animals I've had all that time, or certainly the majority of that time. And the shed came about when we moved to Norwich. Basically, I wanted to kind of really upgrade the way I kept my animals and display them in a way that I really enjoyed, like having a reptile house, almost like having a reptile house in a zoo. That was about 2 years ago now. We started. Well, it was kind of like a lockdown project, I suppose. So. Is it 2 years or is it 3? I remember now. I think it's 2. But that's how that all started.
It's a lockdown project that's obviously gone quite wild and further than you thought it was going to go, is it?
Definitely. I mean, there isn't any particularly new additions, and what I always said from the off-go of building this shed was I wasn't going to try and fill it with millions of animals. Before we even put a brick on the ground or cut a bit of wood, I had every single enclosure kind of planned out to scale in terms of the size. I knew what size I could build this thing to. And basically, I had a plan for every single vivarium that was going in here, rather than just building a big shed and just cramming it sort of full of snakes. But because I think I wear my heart on my sleeve when it comes to keeping animals, and I wanted to give these guys maximum space and just a really good enclosure, rather than build something that I could just absolutely fill with animals and breed everything. And I don't know, but yeah, that was always the plan for this place anyway. Definitely.
So before we go into this shed, which is obviously amazing, let's go back before you moved to Norwich. Is it from Essex?
Yes, Essex, yeah, Southend-on-Sea.
So before you moved, you obviously had all the same animals. So let's go into how you kept them before.
Some of the animals now are still in their vivariums that I used to have. Back then, I thought I was doing the best I could. In terms of buying sort of 5-foot vivariums and getting stuff sort of custom made back then, because you couldn't really buy a 5-foot vivarium off the shelf. So my largest kind of colubrids all sort of had 5-foot vivariums. And then, my royals back then, at the time when Hector is quite new, actually. We only had him for about 6 months before we moved to Norwich. But my royal before then, I always had her in a 3-foot tall kind of mid exotic vivarium, and so I knew that she could climb. She would spend most of her time 3 foot off the ground. So it was just kind of your standard vivariums back then. I wasn't building anything custom. it didn't even cross my mind to build anything custom until I built this place. I just never even thought of doing it, and now I'm obviously a massive advocate for doing it, and I'm trying to help people as much as I can to build custom enclosures. And you don't have to do it like this in a 30-foot shed, but you can have one 6 by 3 foot vivarium in your house, and it could be absolutely amazing. So that's what I'm kind of pushing towards with the YouTube channel and the kind of advice that I give.
So you are keeping raw pythons with 3 foot of height.
Yes.
So you were already keeping in, and a lot of people would agree with this, with height more than what most people give, and then you thought, you know what, this isn't good enough. I'm going to do more than this.
100%. Yeah. So we had those Viv Exotic kind of tall ones, the tallest ones you could get. I had it all set up with all the basket spots at the top, and I had big logs, stuff like that, and it was easier to control the heat in there, so I didn't have to put a floor level kind of basket area as well, because it was only 3 foot in a reptile shed, so in a reptile room back then, so it was hot all the time. So I was confident. I knew going into this with the royal build that they would be up there. I didn't know how much. I couldn't guarantee that they'd be up there all the time, and I didn't honestly think that they'd be 6 foot off the ground. And at one point, one of them actually getting out of the vent that is in the top. I've got a vent that's right in the top that I put my cables through, and he managed to kind of get out of that vent. So I wasn't expecting that. That was a surprise, but definitely I knew they'd be in the trees, and that actually all came back from being a kid in, where was I? London Zoo. I don't know what year it was, but I was really young at the time, and one of the enclosures that kind of stuck out to me. I think I've got a photo of it still. I'll try and get it over to you. It was a royal python vivarium, and I know they don't have that anymore, but they had a royal python. They had a royal python exhibit that had quite a lot of crossing branches in there, and there was 2 royal pythons curled up like a tree boa or a tree python sitting in the trees, and they were like 4 foot off the ground, and that just stayed in my head. So I knew the minute I had the opportunity to do that with royal python, I'm gonna go and do it and try and relive those years of remembering that kind of stuff. Being absolutely fascinated by that when I walked in there as a kid.
So obviously that really drove you to try and to replicate that for yourself. How did other people react to this project when you told them that this is what you're inspired to do?
Oh, I got shot down all the time. I didn't actually. So I started to film building this well before I started my YouTube channel, and I hated it. Didn't like the footage. I thought it was rubbish, and I didn't keep it. But I used to put up a lot of progress photos. Some definitely on Advancing Husbandry page on Facebook, and people would shoot that down. I had to, even now when I put a photo up, I almost have to comment at least once, saying there's multiple basking spots, there's multiple hiding spots, there's ground floor basking spots. It is the same as having a 5 by 2 foot vivarium in terms of heat, but I've added another 4 foot on top of that with more heat. So you have to cover all those bases, and there's definitely people out there that were willing to argue it to the death that I was a bad keeper and I was doing it all wrong.
Interestingly, you've got a similar setup to what Dublin Zoo has, and they've got 2 male raw pythons in that. So how does that make you obviously feel when all these people obviously say these things to you, when you can see it with your own eyes what your own animals are doing?
I don't know. I've got so many. The reason why I kept it, I basically kept it quiet for 9 months. I know we spoke about it, but I kept it quiet for 9 months, so I had the backup in terms of saying I haven't just done this a week ago. I haven't just thrown them in and taken a load of photographs and gone, oh, everything's great. I've got 9 months of evidence to say there hasn't been a single problem. So I don't tend to worry about the people that say it won't work. I'd say sort of over the last sort of few months, especially now that I can say that they've been in there for 9 months, people tend to not argue it so bad. You still get the odd comment, but it's not as it's not mainly aimed at me. It's more people now saying, "Oh, my snake wouldn't do any good in there. He's clumsy. He's this. He's that." And I'm like, so am I. They're clumsy. You know, there's probably there's not much difference between your Royal Python and my Royal Python. If you put him in there, he'll still climb and completely show you up. That's, yeah.
I think.
Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of people say that they're clumsy, but actually they don't give them the opportunity to build that muscle to be climbing. It's like, why can't you tightrope walk and other people can? It's because you haven't practiced doing it yet.
Yep, that's it. And then I can only think of the people that have got clumsy, or what they think is a clumsy snake is possibly a Royal Python that's sort of climbing. It's got a 2 foot sort of height, and it's climbing to a branch that is just sort of leant against the side of a vivarium, and then the branch falls over. They wonder why, you know, these snakes are falling over. But, you know, everything in there, because it's 5 foot in the air, you know, some of those main branches are 5 foot in the air, everything is screwed in, everything is attached in a way that it's not coming loose. I do think it's part of that as well. An animal feels more secure in the trees or in the branches, as you know, as long as they don't move as much. If they're falling around, then the snake's going to fall over and it's going to look clumsy.
I think you're a perfect example of someone who obviously is just leading by example. We've tried, I personally have tried, perhaps not Ellie. Ellie's joined later on. I tried to, you know, use the science to convince and show that this was not the best way, but this was. And I quickly found that you get people to just dig their heels in, and I think the best way now is just to lead by examples and then try and inspire them to want to change rather than tell them why they should. And I think you're a perfect example of someone who's just gone out and done something to such an extreme that there is no other option but to be inspired by it.
Yeah, and that's it really. I don't particularly care too much about sort of following the normal sort of way of doing things. I'm doing it all myself. I'm trying to build kind of like zoo quality enclosures, and I know they go, you know, in the back of my mind, I know that they're going to go down well with good keepers. So yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. Is kind of leading by example, just by filming the way I'm just building stuff and filming it, and that's how it comes across really. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic, especially when, obviously, my past experiences is trying to use studies and data to really show what's happening in the wild. And that may not necessarily come across as just looking at a number compared to actually seeing it happen in front of you in video form. So I think what you've done has gone the opposite way and just shown it, which I think is a massive, massive advocate for giving these animals a respect that I think all three of us think that they deserve. So how much did it cost you to actually build something this grand?
The shed itself was a few years ago. It cost me about £5,000. My wife would argue that it was a few more thousand than that, but I can't remember the exact figures. But now I don't think you'd have much change out of £10,000. Luckily, at the time we moved up here, we had a bit of equity and things like that from just moving and buying and selling a house. But yeah, it cost about £5,000 just for the shell. And I kind of wish back then I did pull my finger out and build as many of these enclosures as possible, because, like I've done in a previous video, I added it all up, building a 6 foot, my 6 foot stacks that I'm building, and I built 4 of the 6. And now the price has gone up by like almost double. Wood is just crazy, but I've got to do it. So it now looks really awkward that I've got like a gap missing between the two. So yeah, it's got to be done. But yeah, the price of this stuff has just gone through the roof. Yeah, one thing that I did kind of push for in the video about building the shed. It's a really old video. It's probably a bit rubbish compared to. I didn't really know I hadn't found my feet back then. I wasn't really. I was doing a lot of weird videos when I first started, and trying to find my, I suppose, style, which is just holding the camera and cutting wood now. But yeah, the whole sort of the thing that I was trying to portray is don't sort of cheap out with insulation, especially for us in the UK. It's like, you know, the cheaper the insulation is, especially now, it's just going to cost more and more to try and keep these rooms going. And you want a good ambient temperature in here for your bibs to then, you know, to build upon that with your basking spots and stuff. And if you're constantly fighting that, you're just burning money. So it definitely helps to spend as much as you can on insulating it. And this shed is more. I say it's a shed. I built it to actual to code, to building regs. It's a garden building, and it's better insulated than my house that I live in. Definitely, it holds the heat better. I'd live out here better.
I love how you're calling it shed. Most keepers would call it facility.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what to call it, and it's not a shed, but shed comes off a bit more, I don't know, cooler, I suppose, a little bit more down to earth, which is what I am. I'm not, I wouldn't call it a facility, and then a reptile garden room doesn't sound as good. Doesn't have a ring to it, does it?
So if someone were to obviously look at that raw python setup and go, I want that, what dimensions is that setup?
The setup is, so it's 5 foot across from left to right, and then it's 6 foot tall, and it's kind of like a wedge shape. So I always planned on having that in the back of the shed, and I didn't want it to kind of be in an awkward position where it's stuck out and blocked off that corner. So looking at it on the left hand side, it's 3 foot deep, and on the right hand side, it's 2 foot deep. So it kind of makes like a kind of wedge, and it feels a little bit more sort of user friendly. Being at the back, it doesn't feel like you haven't got to sort of look at it to one side. It kind of fills the room and helps me get to the other bibs that are behind it, which are the other 2 6 foots as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a monster, definitely.
So what kind of individual cost do you think that would have costed, that individual raw python setup?
I would say you could probably build that now for about, if you weren't going to do all the rock work, because insulation to do the rock work is very expensive, but the timber and everything alone, probably about maybe £300 to £400, I would say.
For a setup that's what, 5 foot, 2 foot, 6 foot, that is not a bad price.
No, and that's something that I do try to come across with the videos is if you DIY stuff, if you're not afraid to screw bits of wood together and cut bits or go to B&Q and get stuff cut, it does work out cheaper. The 6 foot Bavarians here, I think in one of my last videos where I added it all up, I know it's 7 sheets of plywood, which is now quite expensive. But for those 7 sheets of plywood, I get 2 6x3 Bavarians plus enough spare to build some 4x2s. So, I think when we added it up, it was about £500, which for 3 or 4 Bavarians is cheaper. It's cheaper than getting something built custom, especially a 6x3.
Just to offer a comparison, obviously I work in a reptile shop, and obviously I know our prices. A 4x2x2 with us is £250.
There you go. Yeah. I think in the 4x2x2 one that I built, the video that I built made that covers the build for that, it's 1 sheet of plywood. So the wood alone there was £40. And then I think what was it, £50 worth of glass, and for that you've got a solid Bavarian that isn't going anywhere, you know. So it is that's what I'm trying to do. I feel like I've now shown multiple times now how to do this yourself. And it's not, I'm not a carpenter. I am an engineer, but that doesn't help me with wood. I'm really rubbish with wood. That's why it's the look that I go for in here is kind of shabby chic, I suppose, because I'm not very good at. I'm not a craftsman. I'm not a. It just works, and luckily enough, it kind of suits the jungly theme of having a reptile shed. But it certainly isn't a polished look, but it's completely DIY and it's not going anywhere. It's gonna, these vivariums are gonna last forever. Certainly a lot longer than melamine anyway. And it's completely customizable and cheaper in the long run. I think it is cheaper.
I mean, I don't particularly care myself if I had I think just having a 6 by whatever it is tall Royal Python setup, I would not care what the outside of it looked like.
No, it's not too bad actually. Most of it's hidden, so you can't see too much of it. Obviously, the biggest part of it is the glass, and then it does sit on top of a kind of plinth that's got more glass in it as well. So it is a cool one. It is definitely a cool one, and I've obviously got the tortoise in front of that as well, which I think adds a completely different dimension to it. Like standing in the tortoise run to work on the Royal Python feels like I'm working in my own little zoo. Especially with the little hatch for her to go out and stuff like that. It's fun. It makes me kind of fall in love with reptile keeping every time I'm out here. Definitely.
So that was actually leading in perfectly to what I was going to ask. How do you feel when you look at those Royal Pythons in that setup compared to what you had them in previously? Do you enjoy it more? Does it do anything more for you? How has that influenced how you feel about your hobby?
Yeah, I'm so much happier about it. And it's the same with all of these, the bigger enclosures, because I've had all these animals in smaller vivariums back before I built this place. You do have to sort of remind yourself, I do remind myself how cool it is to see an animal like that. And it happens every time I'm out here. Especially with the Royal Python vivarium, there's so much going on inside there as well, because obviously I've got the olive millipedes in there as well. So there's just constantly something happening in there. And right now, I think I've kind of nailed the plant species. It's taken like a year to get the plants right. And I think I've nailed it. So now it's kind of like the exciting time of watching the plants grow. Hopefully they don't get too demolished. But yeah, definitely. It's amazing. I probably didn't give my Royal Python nowhere near as much attention back when she was living in a standard size vivarium as to now. Definitely, I'm monitoring them more, looking at them more, just kind of, just like being around it. Definitely.
So, if you were to compare the two, the feeling you get from having this grand setup compared to if you could have more animals in the same amount of space, is there a part of you that feels like, oh, I could have more species, I'm bored of the species I've got, I could do more of the space, or are you just happy with that amount of space for that animal?
I'm completely happy with the amount of space, with the amount of animals that I've got and the spaces that I've got. Definitely, 100%. I never kind of look in here and go, oh, I should get something else. I'm a bit of I'd say more of a unique reptile keeper in that sense, that I've kind of got what I've got, and I'm done. Purely, obviously the cost of living, it makes a big impact on that now. I couldn't imagine plugging more equipment in and trying to afford it, but yeah, I'm happy. I'm really happy with what I've got now, and I never stand in here and go, oh, we should get some more. We should make that smaller and add more, because that's just not the vibe that's in this shed. That was never the intention.
So I feel a lot of people don't realize that could be there for them. Like, we talk about what Dylan Perrin from Animals at Home says, where we both say about how it scratches an itch. We all have this itch as keepers, well, maybe not yourself, but we all have this itch as keepers to get more, do more, and we want to experience more. But I feel like advancing your care and going up and beyond for your animals, it also scratches that itch. And I feel like there's a whole section of the hobby that may have not experienced that, and it's a whole other hobby for them if they just let themselves fall into it.
I think that definitely is a thing. For me, I've got a smaller northern pine snake, and I've got my male false water cobra back there that are in the original 5 foot by 2 foot vivariums that I used to have when I lived in Essex. And I look at them, I could fit more up there. Like there's space for 3 more snakes there if I kept them like that. But my brain doesn't go there. My brain goes to, I can't wait to put them in the 6x3 that is going to go in that space that I've allowed for it. So I've definitely had that itch or that scratch for getting more animals, and that's probably why I'm here now. You know, there is what is there, 14 snakes, 14 snakes in here, and we've got some more stuff. So it's not a particularly tiny, collection of animals. But I feel like I've sort of got to the stage now where it's more important for me to make sure the animals that I've got is just the care for them is the best that it can be, rather than sort of putting that to one side and adding another animal. And I do talk to people all the time that I kind of I try not to say it to them because but it is a frustrating thing where we're talking about the animal that they've currently got and how they want to improve that, and then straight after that telling me that they want to they want to buy this, they're going to buy that, and can they get this and can they do that? And I'm like, dude, concentrate on the animal that you've got currently. Make that as good as you can. And in my opinion, that's more important than worrying about buying a new animal and worrying about what that new animal needs. That's the way I've done it. But it is easier for me because I've got a fairly weird, not weird, but I've got quite a cool collection of snakes already. But yeah, that's my attitude towards it anyway.
It's almost as if people will read the first few chapters of a book and then they move on to the next book. And you're almost saying, well, hang on a minute, you haven't read the first book yet, you haven't finished it yet. Here's the thing that I always say to Dylan. I had this conversation recently, actually. I always said to him, what is the measure of a good keeper? I said, is it a keeper that knows all the signs, knows everything, has gone down the rabbit hole and has that in their brain, has the ability to, when they get the chance to go out there and do it, they're going to do something amazing, but they're actually in a position where maybe they can't have the space? Or is there a keeper that maybe doesn't know a lot of things but has the space to do things and goes out and does it? I said this to him, which one would you say, just looking at it, is the better keeper? Because it's like, well, technically the one that knows it all might be a better keeper, but the other one's actually gone and done it and has got better care for his animals. So is he the better keeper? But you, I reckon, you've gone both ways. So when you look around that room, do you look at it and go, I feel like a good keeper?
Yeah, I suppose I do. I do look at it and go, you guys, the snakes in here, I sort of am a bit like, you're some of the lucky ones, I suppose. I am trying, definitely trying my hardest. And most of the animals in here have got kind of at least a higher level of care than some people offer. And for me, it's only going up and up and up. I'm not saying I know how to do everything or anything like that at all. But yeah, that's how. I do feel like I do sort of look at some of the enclosures and be like, dude, that is cool. And it makes it warms my heart to sort of seeing an animal in there and going, yeah, that's awesome.
I don't think this is just by any means exaggeration, but you look at that Royal Python setup, and if you've watched any of Jamie's videos and you've seen the behaviour expressed in those setups, those Royal Pythons in captivity they're probably in the top 1% of Royal Pythons in the world with that level of welfare. That is a world-class setup.
No, thank you. Yeah. And the thing is, the truth is, it wasn't even that hard to do. It's some timber, it's plywood, a couple of branches that I got from the woods, and that was my first ever time doing a rock background as well. So just kind of gave it a go and just jumped in feet first and want to do it. So yeah, and that is the basics of the reptile channel, of my YouTube channel. Is, you know, hopefully if you watch enough of the videos, you'll know how to do that yourself, because I really try. I've managed to pick maybe a kind of a corner of the reptile hobby that is the hardest to film and talk about, because I'm constantly filming myself building stuff and cutting things, and it takes ages to do anything. But I'm trying to help people do that themselves and build that themselves. If someone just watched the video and built a 6 by 3 foot enclosure in, you know, that's in their bedroom for a smaller species of snake that most people would maybe put in a 4 by 2 by 2, then I've done my job. I'm really happy with that, and that's kind of the basics behind the whole YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've said it in past episodes, and me and Eddie talk about it all the time as well. But I feel like we need to move away from look what I keep, but look how I keep it.
Yeah, and that's it. And I don't watch those kind of videos, and I don't make those videos either. Where it's sort of like, I see it a lot, especially maybe sort of coming from America, where it's like 100+ animals. Look at this, blah blah blah. This is amazing. I've got 100 animals, and I get people comment on my stuff all the time saying, you know, can you do a room tour? Can you show us this? And I'm like, I don't really make YouTube channel. I don't really make videos about, you know, trying to show you that I've got loads of animals. I don't want you to be like that. But yeah, that is, I'm trying to differ away from that. I'm trying to be like, right, you've got that one snake that you want to look after. Let's make an awesome vivarium for it, and, you know, come with me, and we'll make something cool. That's kind of where I'm going with it, definitely.
I think it's amazing to focus on royals that they're not just a beginner. So you don't get the royal and be like, right, well, I can keep it in a 4 foot now, so then I'm going to get a green tree python, because that can be made into a cool setup. No, you can use that royal python, you can keep it in that amazing setup and making a display animal out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I was thinking about this as well, just earlier when I was thinking about when we were doing this interview, that the barn vivarium that I built. I don't know if you guys have seen the barn one, but I was trying to remember back to when I got that snake, Penny. She's an albino black rat snake, and she was like, I think I paid £25 for her. She was the same back then. She was the same price as a corn snake from a reptile shop. I don't know what they are now. I know snakes aren't £20 anymore, but she was a cheap snake. And I'm like, she's living in this cool barn that everyone's like, oh man, that's a lovely setup. And I'm like, it's just a £25 snake essentially. But yeah, you could put, you know, amazing looking animals in that. You could put, you know, monitor lizards, or, you know, like you say, a python, a tree python, or some sort of boa that could live in the trees. And but yeah, no, I've just got the royal pythons in there, and that does it for me. I'm really happy with that.
I'm really glad that there is someone that's showing the best possible way to keep royal pythons on YouTube, because I feel like people aren't going to like me saying it, but I feel like a lot of the better creators in the reptile niche on YouTube are some of the smaller ones. When I look towards people like you, or I look towards Laurie Torini, I feel like that they are the top tier, but it's almost inverted. So I'm glad that there is examples of this level of welfare on YouTube that people will eventually find and hopefully take massive inspiration from.
Yeah, thank you, man. That was the plan with this. It's never going to be like YouTube is my job or anything like that. So there isn't these crazy exciting videos of me getting bitten by a boy girl or like Taiwanese beauty snake or anything like that. And I do look at my videos and just go, they're going to be a slow burner, but they're kind of like a reference video. Like, I don't feel like there's that many videos out there that kind of show you how to do every single part of a build, you know, from rock work to waterproofing. And that's my most popular video, is waterproofing a wooden vivarium. And if you actually, I looked recently, actually, it was my list of kind of like the most popular ones from a year ago, and it is all just DIY. How to build a tortoise run, how to waterproof the vivarium, and it's all just things that try to help reptile keepers keep their animals better, or just help them build stuff for their animals. So yeah, that's what I'm always going to do. It's just going to be slow burner videos, documenting kind of my life in here, and building enclosures and kind of showing you how I do it.
Here's something that I always say to Ellie as well about what we're trying to do on this channel. But if you look at one of your recent videos of your update on your raw python setup, I think they had like 4,000 views, right? Imagine if each one of those views was a keeper that has 20 animals, and you've inspired 4,000 people. Imagine how many animals you've helped just by making that video.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? And I don't. Someone tagged me in a post a couple of days ago where they were watching kind of my intro music on their laptop, and I look at it and go, what are people doing? Why are they watching my stuff? That's mad. But yeah, it's insane, and like that's why I keep doing it. Really, is to just hopefully there'll be one or two keepers in there that look at that and go, oh man, I'm going to build something like that. Wait a minute, he showed me how to do that as well. Oh, let's do that then. And it's just make it really easy to just go ahead and, and smash something out that looks cool and works better for your animal.
I feel like there was, at the start of reptile keeping in the hobby, people made their own things because that's the only choice they had. And then we've kind of been like, not hoodwinked because that's really harsh, but we've been made, this is easy accessible boxes that you can put, but they cost more than if you did it yourself. Like, it's crazy to me that a PVC 4x2x2 costs more than your amazing royal setup. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, I can't remember how much vision enclosures are and stuff, but yeah, I think I could build quite a lot of 6-foot vivariums, like the barn ones and things like that, for 1 4-foot vision enclosure. It's just crazy.
So let's go into the actual nitty-gritty of this raw python setup. Obviously, we can see the height behind you, and if you're an audio listener, I recommend either going back and watching this or going straight to Jamie's channel. But you've obviously got a lot of height, a lot of platforms, a lot of branches. But let's talk about the floor. How deep is that substrate?
The substrate is about what are we going for down there? It's about 150 millimeters deep. So it's got a fair amount of space in there, because originally I was going to live plant the whole floor, and it didn't turn out that way. I moved over to using pots instead. So when the royals ultimately destroy everything, I can pull it out, and it was easier. It was full of allocations and stuff when it first grew in there, and it looked awesome. And then the royals got in there and just destroyed it. But there's about 150 millimeters of soil in there. Oh, yeah.
So I obviously watched your video, and if anyone who's listening or watching hasn't watched it, go and have a look. But you've also got like a root ball from a tree in there, haven't you? Can they actually get under that in like a burrow system?
Yep. So I made sure, I think I mentioned it in the video, that I put the substrate in kind of first, so there was a floor of substrate, and then I dropped the root ball in on top of that, so I could then dig underneath it with my hand, and I've sort of formed a burrow underneath it already. And the snakes have been in there, definitely. The female has been in there sometimes for like a couple of days, and I sort of look and go, oh, she might have laid some eggs or something there or something, but they never have. But there is room there, sorry, for them to get under there as well. I'm pretty sure now it's just full of millipedes. That seems to be the new kind of millipede den.
So as a percentage of time, how much time do you feel they spend on the floor versus like in an arboreal position?
It's a very low percentage. I would say maybe about 10 or 20% of their time on the floor. I very rarely see them curled up on the floor doing nothing. If they're on the floor, it's normally sort of in the evening, and they're out kind of exploring and stuff, and they tend to move along the floor. and do the full length of the floor space there. But it's very rare that I will open up or come in and see them just curled up on the floor, sitting there, doing nothing. And it's actually the same with the lower level basking spot as well. I very rarely see them on the lower level basking spot, which kind of, it blows my mind because they've got two, but they're identical. So they can sit under there, and I've tested it all. They're the same wattage lamps. They're on the same outlet, everything like that, and all the same distances away from somewhere to sit. And they choose to be on the higher one, or sit on a planter that's closer to the higher one rather than sit on the floor level one.
So I would like to draw some comparisons to obviously the studies, because I think this would be a great example of how maybe the wild may be different from captivity or may not. Do you see a difference between percentage of time climbing male versus female, or are they exactly the same?
I would say my male is a lot more active in the branches, which kind of goes hand in hand with the research going back, wasn't it? When they found a lot more males in the trees. But my female tends to kind of sit in one spot, which is like a planter halfway up on the hot side. And she kind of moves from one planter to the other and kind of sits across there. That's not saying she hasn't been up there, she has, but my male definitely spends a lot more time right up as high as he can go. And sort of in the mornings, I don't know if you can see, but in the mornings I've got like quite a big ledge at the top, which probably sits about 5 foot, maybe 5.5 foot off the ground. And he's almost always on there as well. And my female isn't there as much. So definitely I've noticed that the male spends a lot more time higher and climbing.
That's fascinating. So you must see like all these studies and then look at your own animals and be like, yep.
Yeah, they're doing that, yeah. And then when people go, no, they don't do that, I'm like, yeah, they do. It's back there. It's happening right now. And that's quite cool now that I've sort of told everyone on the YouTube channel that they're in there, even though it was the worst secret ever, because there was always two in there and I just messed up filming it. But now, if I'm doing something, I'm filming myself doing something, and he's out, in the last video I did it, and I'll sort of turn around and go, oh, look, there he is, he's out. And yeah, it's just, yeah, always just out and about and doing something and just, yeah, showing people up.
Showing people up. So it must be a nice confirmation as well when obviously what is happening in your setup is also what is happening in the wild. It must make you feel like, yeah, I must have got this right.
I think so, definitely. And if I haven't got it right, I do feel like I've given myself enough kind of places and different level basking spots and stuff like that, just in case it wasn't right, that if it wasn't going to be worse for the animal. If they didn't want to climb and they didn't want to be up there, they could have spent all their time on the lower basking spot, which is perfectly fine. But yeah, I kind of calculated all that in to try and make sure it was going to go right first time. But yeah, it is quite cool thinking that it has worked, and I sort of knew it was going to work, to say, because I took all the steps to kind of help with that. But it is cool looking at him going, yeah, that worked. That was good.
Just out of interest, do you know what they experienced before they came to you? Because when we were talking to Laurie, for example, snakes that have been living in racks struggle a lot more to adapt. Did you? Yeah.
So my female was one of the first snakes I got when I got back into reptile keeping as a teenager. I kind of dropped out for a little while, working full time and things like that. So I brought her as a hatchling from a reptile show. She was 10 pounds, she was always in a vivarium, kind of like a normal 4x2, and then went up to the 3 foot high and stuff like that. But the male Hector, who's kind of the showstopper really in there, he was actually given to us from my wife's sister's boyfriend. Something like that happened, and we took him in, and up till then, he was kept in a 3 foot wide, I don't even know if it was 2 foot tall enclosure, and that was his wooden vivarium. That was it. He had a heat mat in there. It was terrible, a terrible setup. And I put him in there. Did I put him in there first? No, I put him in the 3 foot tall enclosure that I had at home first, and just knew from then that he can climb and he can do everything. So I don't know. They aren't really from like a rack setup. They've certainly had a branch or two in their enclosure for quite a lot of their life before coming here. But yeah, I wouldn't know what they'd be like. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to kind of maybe take a royal that had been kept in a rack. Not that I want another royal, but be interesting to maybe take like an ex-breeder that had just been in a rack all its life and put it in there and see what it does. I'm pretty confident it would climb up there and not have a problem.
It's pretty interesting. Obviously, yours they came from an environment that had complexity in their past, so their brains had the chance to develop, do things properly. I would like to see more research done on those animals that have had no complexity, no stimulation, and their brains aren't there yet. We need to figure out what is the best way to transition them. And I think Laurie is kind of on that, but I feel like we should have some more study related literature about it, and I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. But I know, just from having my male Hector, just from going from that 3 foot wide vivarium, I don't even know if it was 3 foot, it might have even been 2, but up to having the 3 foot tall one, I was just blown away by just seeing how he could do that. So, but yeah, there should be more done like that. Yeah, I'm not going to offer that enclosure out to experiment, but yeah, it should be done definitely.
I'd like to play around with that. It's an interesting thing with the culture around Royal Pythons, where there's a lot of money involved, that will always be an element as to why things don't shift. But someone recently said to us that maybe we should separate the boundaries. Let's say, like, this is breeding standard, and yes, racks are allowing you to keep lots of animals in a small amount of space. They can be kept clinical. They can be good for time management in like a business sense. But that is not the pet standard of keeping. The pet standard of keeping is what's best for the animal, and we're going all out. So maybe our initial first step should be say, well, this is breeder standard, this is pet standard. And then maybe the breeders who are saying that this is what's best for a Royal Python, maybe when research comes out and more evidence comes forward, maybe they don't feel so obliged to defend that position when the science isn't there. So maybe they'll say, well, this is how I'm keeping, because I'm a breeder, I'm keeping in this style, but when I'm selling to you, you should definitely go forward in this pet style and do everything you can for this snake. I feel if we get to that stage, there's less of it's almost like a tribalism in this hobby where it's an us versus them. I feel like if we break down that barrier and we get to that stage, then I feel like that is a more happy place to be.
Yeah, definitely. That would be good. And I think it also boils down to just people seeing, you type Royal Python into YouTube or something, the first thing you'll get is someone with a room full of racks, and you're just going to automatically think as a new keeper, well, they're doing it like that. Why can't I do it like that? So yeah, there should be that, definitely. What we need is someone breeding Royal Pythons in a room full of 6-foot enclosures. That's what we need, don't we? And that will. But yeah, that's the problem, I think, isn't it? They survive in tubs, and that's the worst thing about it. They survive in there, so people are going to do that.
I feel like if we make that transition to pet standard, breeder standard, again, welfare is the same. Like, it doesn't matter what your intentions with the animal are. The animal's welfare is the same throughout. But that's up to the people engaging in this breeding standard to justify going forward. But for now, let's not be telling people, no, don't keep it like a pet, keep it like this, because actually we want to recognize what's best for the animal. And that's the stage I want us to be at.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's difficult because I think it's something that we spoke with Chaz about species getting a reputation. When we first started keeping royals, we were taking them from the wild. They got a bad rap for being bad feeders and not doing well. they've gone into racks and the code's been cracked necessarily, and they're thriving by eating and breeding. And then so the bad rap has gone, oh, they're not problem feeders if we keep them in these tubs, when we haven't made the journey properly of going wild caught to not acclimatizing well. So I think that we definitely is coming out of it with a more educational view and getting rid of the reputation. Because when I first went to keep royals back 10 years ago, I was looking and all you see is they like cramped spaces. They don't feed well. You're going to have a problem feeder. You should stay away from them if you can't deal with that. And it put me off of keeping them, when really it's not understanding that there are species that go through fasts. It's not being picky. It's necessarily just natural biology.
Yeah, definitely. And that the whole having, your animal's going to be stressed out if it's in a vivarium that's too big. It's just so common with royal pythons as well. And I even had it when I was building that. People saying your animals are going to be stressed. They're not going to eat. Anything like that, and it's been completely different. They eat hanging from the trees in there, like hanging from the branches. They'll hang all the way down and just wrap round a chick as well. That's another thing, isn't it? They don't eat birds either, do they? But it was just full of people saying things like that, and it scares new keepers definitely, because it just sounds like I was talking to a keeper yesterday in Finland about helping out with a vivarium and kind of helping plan it out for a royal python, and she was so stressed from trying to had multiple heat mats because of all these different hot spots and a 100-watt basking spot in the middle and all this sort of stuff, and worrying about the humidity and stuff. And I actually wrote on there, it shouldn't be this stressful, but that's it's people caring as well, but it is the problem. We do. It's scary, and there's a lot of information out there that's conflicting.
Well, I feel like what it comes down to is when you take an animal that's known nothing but a rack and then you put it into this complex environment, it does freak out and it doesn't cope, because you've gone for an animal that's known nothing its entire life and its synapses are not developed. It's like working out. If you took a skinny person and then try to make them lift a heavy weight, you'd be like, well, obviously they can't lift it, they're skinny. But no one thinks about the mental side of like, well, this brain isn't been working out. Then you put it into this complex environment and it just can't cope. So there's an element of people have done that, seeing that a royal doesn't cope in the complex environment and gone, well, royals prefer the dark space. But there's almost a cycle of, we put them in this environment, we neglect their brains, so to speak, and then stress them out by changing them. And it's a self-feedback loop of like, oh, the rack is better. And that is a culture that is going to take a bit of time to address. And I feel like as research comes out, we will get there. But it's also a reason that the human element as well, we've got to realize that these aren't necessarily all evil people or anything. It's that they from themselves have seen an animal they've taken from a rack and put it in a viv, and they've gone, well, that's stressed out. And they may have done that like 10 times, thinking they're doing these like systematic testing. But if you move out 10 animals who have known nothing into vivariums, you're going to get 10 animals of stress. So to that person, they've tested it. They know they're right because they've seen it with their own eyes. But it's our ability to interpret what we're seeing,
Yeah. And just throwing it straight in the deep end isn't going to be the right thing to do, is it? It's just got to be done the right way and slowly, and that is the problem. I feel like from what I'm seeing in the UK, rat keeping is possibly slowly kind of falling away. I don't know, but yeah, I think the thing is to just keep pumping out videos like this and trying to just show people that's and just constantly trying to show people that there is a different way of doing stuff, and we can go back to this, or we can keep animals like this, and it's potentially better. Well, it's better, to be frank.
I had a train of thought and I just completely lost it because I thought 3 things at once. I was like, oh, that's a good way to go. But
I can tell you about my fight I had recently on Facebook with a guy that was keeping a northern pine snake in in a tub, and he called me an elitist and a newbie, for basically showing the 6 foot vivarium that I've got for my Northern Pine, Mr. Pine down there, with all that, I've set it up like the closest I could find to a kind of like a forest floor kind of setting. Yeah, he had sort of what do you have, an inch of substrate, and that was it, and just kept saying substrate is the most important thing in the world. It needs to be all you're doing there is making a pretty vivarium. And I was like, it's not pretty. It might be pretty to us, but it's recreating a forest floor. Like, how's that? I don't know. It was quite heated for a while, because I was basically saying, like, I'm not making these enclosures pretty for me. I'm trying to recreate that little piece of wild for them, so they can enjoy it and they can feel more comfortable and exhibit their natural behaviours. Just having a tub full of what you think is deep substrate isn't necessarily the most stimulating enclosure possible. Yeah, we had a bit of an argument about that, and I got called an elitist, which I thought was quite funny, being as I wouldn't say I'm an elitist. I'm just a guy that cuts wood and builds stuff and just gives a crap.
So, did you post an image somewhere, and that's him saying you're just doing something pretty?
No, he posted an image of the pine snake in the tub, saying, "Oh, this snake's missed its feed. Maybe next time," and he's following. And so I replied to that with a picture of mine sitting in the vivarium, a really nice photo that I took, saying, "Oh, mine's never missed a feed. Maybe that's because it's not living in a tub with an inch of substrate and not a single piece of decor or stimulation." So yeah, sort of going in for it now. Every now and again, I fancy a little rumble.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Because I was going to say, like, sometimes to me, I will post like my Mexican black king snake setup, which is obviously dark because they're hibernating at the moment. But I'll post that somewhere and be like, "Oh, I moved this branch or did this," and then I will have people comment and be like, "You're only doing that for you." But yeah, that means something to the animal, and it does. Previously, I've been getting quite frustrated and annoyed with people, but I think nowadays you just got to realise it makes people feel shit. It makes people feel shit, and rather than address the issue and go, "Okay, I don't want to feel like I'm not doing the best for my animal," it's sometimes easier to say, "Well, that's not what the animal needs. The animal only needs this," and to just kind of confirm to yourself that, like, it's just for the keeper. It's just for the keeper. Like, I'm not bad. I'm not bad. And in a way, you have to like kind of feel for people sometimes that they obviously they are emotionally struggling with it. To the fact that they even need to go out of their way to comment that.
Yeah, so, definitely. Yeah, and it did, that kind of comment saying you're just doing it for yourself is it's not nice for you to hear either as that keeper in there, because we're not spending the sort of money on UV and full spectrum and going out of our way to make sure we've got a good halogen basket spot or whatever. That isn't for me. I haven't bought that stuff for me. It doesn't benefit me at all. It just it's the animal. It's for the animal, and that's the only benefit that I'm getting from that is knowing that the animal in there is having a better time. So and showing some natural behaviours and things. So yeah, that does. Yeah, I don't really I didn't agree with that comment, that's for sure, and I didn't agree with the elitist bit either, because that's one thing that I'm really trying not to. I'm not trying to show off anything in here. In fact, I think I'd go the opposite way and go out of my way to show you that it's possible and it's easier than you think, and I'll show you how to do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of us get that rap of the elitist comment, but again, you have to feel for the person, because obviously there's something in them that gets hurt by seeing that. They feel like they need to drag that down and lessen its importance or lessen its success or along those lines. But obviously, I used to get into arguments all the time, and it's just draining for you as well. You're not going to change their mind by showing them up or logically turning them around and making them fall on their ass or Like I used to spend ages just like completely just turning someone's argument apart and just. But at the end of the day, it doesn't get anywhere. It doesn't help their animals. It doesn't help anyone seeing that. I think the only way that potentially could help an animal there if someone sees reading like passively and goes, "Oh, okay, like this guy's obviously made quite a long point there, and maybe I won't keep it in the tub." But at the same time, I feel like the best way is to just lead by example and just ignore it and just move on.
Yeah, definitely. It ruins your day because you're then looking at your phone going, oh, well, they are, they replied yet. What's going on? But,
Yeah,
definitely ruins your day. It's not worth it.
yeah, you've definitely got to learn to bite your tongue, and that's me. It's a learning process, but yeah, Ellie's a lot better than I am. Ellie's just like, why are you even replying? I'm like, oh, yeah, fair enough.
I'm not combative at all. I don't really participate in social media groups because I get a lot of people belittling me because the fact that I am a young lady and I must not know anything. I had it in a chameleon group where a new keeper was commenting and they were like, oh, what's the bare minimum? What's the minimum requirements for, I think it was a Yemen chameleon or something. And I said, well, if it's the only one you've got, give it everything. Like make it a really nice big display because they will use every bit of that space. And I just had people like coming at me being like, you don't know anything. I've been keeping them for X amount of years and I've bred them and I've done this. And I was like, actually, I have a master's in zoology. I do know just like a little bit actually. And no, they will use every bit of space because there's not a box in the wild. And they were saying, you won't understand, you can't keep the temperature gradients. I'm like, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Tiny bit of effort into it and you'll figure it out. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because every zoo struggles with their massive enclosures to keep the temperature gradient.
And we're all using the same equipment as well. The zoos are using the exact same equipment that we have available to us.
Yeah, that's it. But I use 2 basking spots in there instead of 1. Like multiple basking spots inside an enclosure that might sort of blow some people's minds. Keeping sort of at home and stuff, but it can be done. There's nothing that the zoos are doing that we're not. They just don't know.
I think your setup is better than a lot of zoo enclosures, I have to say. And that's why I love it so much for like the inspiration and passion it can draw out of people to inspire them to want to do more. So let's go into your setup a little bit more. Obviously, we just talked about the fact that you have 2 basking spots. Are they the exact same temperature or do they differ slightly?
No, exact same temperature. Each one has got a 75-watt halogen reptile systems lamp inside it. It's slightly dimmed for the summer, so I can adjust it because the basking spots aren't on a thermostat. They're actually just on throughout the day at a solid temperature because of the size of the enclosure. I wasn't worried about that, but I have them on a dimmer that I can sort of turn them down depending on how hot the reptile room gets. And then the actual ambient temperature is controlled by the thermostat. So that's how I've got that kind of running. But yeah, essentially they're identical. Did a lot of testing with infrared guns and stuff like that, and just to make sure. But pretty much everything in there is identical for the hotspots.
And you said you had a burrow. Have you measured humidity and temps down there?
Yeah, so I've got like a Wi-Fi. When I first started it, I still have in there. I've got like a little Wi-Fi hydrometer, temperature thing, and that back then I've forgotten some of the measurements, but it is quite humid down there. It was sitting around, I think it was about 80% in the evenings, maybe because it was all live planted. There's a lot of moisture in the soil. And then I think the driest that kind of area got down to was about sort of between 60 and 70%. And then as it obviously goes higher, I'm naturally losing some of that humidity, and then I'm sort of, gaining a little bit more heat. So, it was the floor space on there because of the size of the thing. The floor space kind of sits at the ambient temperature of the reptile room for most of it, anyway. Obviously, on the left-hand side where the basking spots are, it is warmer around that area. But because I've got sort of like 5 foot by 3 foot almost of space, it sits at around the ambient temperature, which does vary. So I do kind of have like a hot like, hotter and cooler months in here just naturally because I'm out, exposed to the elements in the shed. But yeah, so it sits at about, I think it sits at about 23, 24 degrees at the moment for most of it, apart from the hottest side.
So obviously you're creating like fantastic gradients along the entire enclosure, and obviously you're going to have a gradient, obviously not only horizontal from your basking spot to the other side, but also vertical. So in terms of air temperature, have you measured air temperatures near the top of the enclosure?
What was the air temperature? It does get quite warm up there, which is why I fitted a fan in there to kind of suck a bit of it out in the real hotter sort of kind of months. Like right now, I don't use the fan; that's all turned off. But yeah, it got quite hot up there. I think it got to about sort of like with all the lights running, because obviously bigger enclosure. I've got bigger UV lights, bigger LED lights in there. So I think it was getting up to about, I'd say the ambient temperature up there was about 27 or 28 degrees, if I remember correctly. I haven't actually measured it for quite a while. I kind of now just kind of go off of the cooler side probe and kind of have a bit of a feel for how the vivarium sits. And I know that when the ambient temperature in here is a bit cooler, right now it's a couple of degrees cooler than it is in the summer. I just crank those basket spot dimmers up just a little bit just to keep that heat back up.
So almost as if like as long as they've got the cool area, they can retreat to that. So they can't overheat, and then it's less of a, you're not worrying so much.
Zero worry in this one. And it is purely based on that size. I know if the animal wants to sit, anywhere up to maybe sort of 30 degrees, it can go under them basket spots. I know they're there. And if it doesn't, then there's, they could go 5 foot in the opposite direction where there's nothing there. So I am completely stress-free with that enclosure. I worry more about trying to, get basket spots right and making sure things aren't overheating in the smaller enclosures than I am in the bigger enclosure. Definitely, 100%.
So I can see you've also given options. You've isolated areas. I can see this front branch has obviously got UV over that, and they've also got separated across obviously the basking lamp in a proportion of like how much they independently select for UV. Do you see them basking under the UV quite a lot, or?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Just yes.
Yes, yeah. The male definitely Hector. He sits up that high, and he's above any of the basking areas. So I don't know. There isn't much reason for him to be up that high. And he is within, I think last time I checked it on the solar meter, it was at about between sort of 2 and 3 on the sort of Ferguson zone. So that's the only thing that's hard about an enclosure like that, is that there isn't much UVB radiation inside the whole enclosure. So I'm not going to hang lamps lower down for UV because they're just going to climb all over them and destroy everything, because they are like that. So I do have to fit the UV to the top, but I definitely have seen the male basking under there and being exposed to a good amount of UVB as well.
Obviously, that top shelf is very, very bright. Is that because like the Jungle Dawn LEDs up there?
It is up there. It's nowhere near as bright in person. This camera on here is a bit rubbish, but
right, okay.
It's a much more natural looking light in the in real life. But yeah, the Jungle Dawn is up there. Jungle Dawn in there? There isn't a Jungle Dawn in there. There's a full. So I've got a 4 foot long full spectrum LED lamp in there, which is kind of like my pattern that I use for most of these enclosures. I don't actually use too many of the Jungle Dawns. I use the Jungle Dawns in my live planted kind of more tropical enclosures, I suppose, like the exoterras. But yeah, there is a full spectrum LED in there, plus a 54 watt Reptile Systems UVB the T5 fixture in there as well. So yeah, it is bright. It definitely is bright, but it's not too bright. I feel like maybe if I use the biggest, I'd be interesting, because I think I do own one for my standing stay gecko. But I'd be a little bit worried that it'd be insanely bright in there if I had maybe the Jungle Dawn in there as well as the big UVB and stuff like that. but I have tried it.
Obviously, you're saying that snake is above all the basking spots, but it is brighter up there. There is more research coming out. We have nowhere near as enough research as we should do, but there is the fact that visible light plays more of a role thermally and hormonally than people realise. So I don't know if you've ever seen the works from Frances Baines. I think she also did an episode on our sister podcast, Animals at Home, with Dylan Perrin. And she talks about how like visible light will obviously go through the brain and through the skull, not just through like the pineal gland or the parietal light, but literally just straight through the skull. Do we know how much that affects a raw python? Whether hormonally they are eliciting a lot of, I don't know what I was going to go with that there, but what are they getting from that visible light, from it activating their brain hormonally, maybe even just thermally, what they're doing with that visible light?
Yeah, definitely. And and not using a jungle dawn in there wasn't, like something that I was dead against. It's just happened that I tend to use all my plant growth lamps as LED patterns rather than that. But that is something that I haven't particularly experimented much with, except I've got the reptile systems. They call it the noodle. I think it's the ES screw kind of massive grow lamp kind of thing, and I use that above my line day gecko. And there's something about it. Like they do bask in that. It'd be amazing to know what is going on there. But you put your hand under that, it warms up, definitely.
And that all comes down to all the power density research that Roman Urine and Fran and whatnot are doing when you combine visible light and infrared, you're getting closer to sunlight. That is something that I'm saving for the deep dive for bearded dragons that I'm experimenting with. But I can't see any reason why raw pythons wouldn't benefit from that either. I mean, sunlight is sunlight.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, definitely. It's just maybe one day I'll put one in there, but currently I'm using as least amount of electricity as possible currently. So I'm not gonna take that bat out and put a giant guggling lamp in there.
Will you be surprised? The LED spotlight that I got is an Amazon spotlight and it's 14 watts, but it's so intense.
Is it? Oh well, actually, like a screw-in ES
E27. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. That's interesting because I'm always thinking, in the raw bib to put like the long jungle dawns in there. Like I think they're 55 watts or something like that.
They're not intense enough. They're very good for background visible light and like a broad, like array of light, but we're talking like intensity in one spot to reach the amount of lux that we may experience in the wild. Like it's a different ball game. That's how it actually warms as well. Yeah,
that's very interesting. And that is the way it goes with reptile keeping, isn't it? You just keep changing things and evolving, and that's why I actually moved away from using deep heat projectors to using more halogens and stuff like that as we kind of evolve with that kind of stuff and do more research. So I'm trying to keep on top of it as much as I can, but I haven't moved over to the to using LED as much, nowhere near as much as I don't think we will be in the future.
So let's go into diet of these royal pythons a bit. I know we touched upon the bird issue and the fact that 70% of like their diet in the wild is birds, especially for the males. That the females less so. But are you feeding a lot of birds in the diet? What is your diet?
Yeah, so my diet is quite varied. I try and mix it up from both a kind of keeping the animals stimulated way and also a money saving way, and that is to mix in day old chicks in my diet. I do buy quite a lot of them anyway because my boygers tend to be more sort of bird based diet, but the royals absolutely take down chicks. I could feed them probably every other feed. They would take down chicks, so I sort of switch it up between mice, rats, and the day old chicks. I tend not to go too big with my rats. Everything in here kind of gets smaller rats or medium rats. I don't tend to try and go as big as I can with them. But yeah, They take down day-old chicks. They've always taken down day-old chicks. I've always offered that, so I've never had an issue with it. I'd say actually they go for that more readily. If they were ever going to have a little bit of a hunger strike, day-old chick would be the first thing they'd go for over a rat or a mouse.
I think there's also an element to this of us getting too fixed on what they're eating in the wild. When in captivity, as long as it's not adverse to health, I feel like you just diversify it as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we are very limited to what we can, commercially buy and offer our reptiles. So if you've got three options, mix up the three, and there's more options out there. But essentially, we've got mice, rats, and chicks for the average kind of reptile keeper. Then why not offer a bit of all of it? It really doesn't hurt. I can't think of any way that would do any damage to a snake.
And it brings costs down.
100%. Yeah, feeding out chicks. I do like a big bucket of chicks. Just feed everyone day-old chicks. I don't feed weekly or anything like that. I don't have a set schedule. I just sort of feed when I remember. And yeah, that's every now and again we just offer out a big old bucket of chicks, and everyone gets one. Well, everyone gets a few. Mr. Pine, he'll smash down, maybe 5 easily without even trying.
So when you took your animals that obviously were kept in smaller vivariums and put them into this large enclosure, did you notice a difference in their body composition as they started to climb more and use more of the environment?
I wouldn't say I've noticed too much. Like we'd expect them to be, muscly and that sort of thing, but I haven't noticed it too much in the Royal Pythons. My Royal Pythons aren't particularly fat or anything like that. I do feed everything out here and keep things on the more slender side rather than really sort of overfeed everything. But I wouldn't say I've noticed much difference. I was just amazed from day one how well they just went straight up on the branches and stuff. They had that in there already. They had they're just a giant tube of muscles anyway, aren't they? So they had that in them. So I haven't really noticed too much. But yeah, definitely.
So how much I have seen your royals obviously from watching videos, and their condition looks fantastic. How much do they weigh?
That's a good question. I haven't weighed them for a long time. I'm a little bit hands off with that kind of thing with them guys. I kind of go on a bit more of a visual kind of thing. I know what they should look like. I don't tend to weigh them too much. So I don't actually know that question. I don't know how much they weigh. I wouldn't even be able to guess because I've never worked with Royal Pythons in a way that I could even kind of guess what weight they are. But yeah, no, I've never done that. I've never weighed anything apart from my tortoise, obviously when she goes into cremation, and the leopard geckos and things like that. But no, don't weigh the snakes that often at all.
Yeah, I was asking that question for the benefit of Royal Python keepers that wanted to know, because Royal Python keepers love to weigh everything, don't they?
No, I couldn't think of anything worse than dragging them out and weighing them. I know that they look fine. That the weight, their weight in grams isn't gonna tell me too much about their health that I can't see with my eyes.
Are you big on handling, or are you just kind of hands off completely?
I'm mainly hands off completely. There isn't too many snakes in here because, like we said, there's two species of boiga, forceful cobras, Taiwanese beauty snake. They're not the most handleable animals. So I've always been fairly hands off with all my animals. I don't have many lizards that we can handle. We've got Rocky the bearded dragon. He's absolutely fine. But my other lizards are crocodile skink, lion day gecko, standing day gecko. These you're not going to handle very often. So I'm very much a look back, step back and observe over getting them out and play with them, and that's not something we do. We've got cats and dogs, cats and the dog for that.
Have you considered putting any sort of like gecko in that enclosure with them?
No. I have seen people suggest it, but I honestly think my male would get them. They're on it in there. They're quick. So I am, yeah, I wouldn't be maybe a tiny gecko, but no, it's never crossed my mind. I'm really happy with the millipedes in there, actually. The millipedes give me as much kind of joy seeing them because I've got a millipede that climbs 6 foot. Like I've got the tallest millipede enclosure probably in the world. But so seeing the millipedes climb up the background and sit on the back and climb along the branches and things like that, that gives me as much joy in there. The only other thing I was going to add was a couple of male Pacnoda beetles, but I haven't got around to doing that either, just to kind of make it look quite cool and stick to that kind of African theme. But no, haven't considered geckos. I don't think I ever would. If anything, I did think it'd be quite cool to eventually have like a gecko living in the shed. But that's once I've built everything and the doors aren't wide open and I'm dragging stuff in and out all the time. But yeah, that's for a future project.
Fair enough. Because I've seen a lot of people use some of the. I don't know what the genus is called, but it's the same genus as the Williamside, the electric blue daygecko, but not the daygecko. It's daygecko, isn't it? Yeah, there is a member of the genus that's from the same area as raw pythons, and actually, if you look at the diet studies, a reptile has never been in any of the diet studies of a raw python. No, that they are exclusively mammal and bird.
That would be interesting, but I wouldn't want to find out. I could be anything worse than putting one in there and watching it go. But yeah, I'm sure a small lizard would go in there fairly well. But yeah, that would be interesting. But so it's not something that I've got any future plans to do.
So if they were to obviously mate and she would be with eggs, what would you do with the offspring? Would you potentially raise them in like a tub scenario, or would you go for like little mini complex environments?
What we're talking about? What, the millipedes or the pythons?
The pythons.
The pythons. I wouldn't keep the eggs.
Would you not?
No, I wouldn't keep the eggs. I always said this. If she ever does lay eggs, there's no need for a normal royal python in the market, especially up in Norfolk, where there's not tons of us reptile keepers up here anyway. But yeah, I'm not interested in selling royal pythons. I couldn't do that. No, I would destroy the eggs before they had a chance to do anything.
And I feel like when this comes out, hopefully you have people that will go to your videos and really enjoy what you're putting out. But to be fair, looking at my analytics, I can see that my audience already watches you. So I think they'll be pleasantly surprised when they see you come on this channel.
That's really cool. Yeah, I look forward to it, definitely. Yeah, no, it's been great. It's an honour to be invited on and talk to you guys, because obviously feel like I'm just a guy in a shed building some reptile enclosures. Yeah, it's nice to get recognised for it, definitely.
I think you're going to get a whole lot more as you grow. But thank you very much for coming on, Jamie. It's been fantastic. I feel like people are going to love this. And would you like to give yourself a shout out of where people can find you if they don't already know?
Yeah, well, it's Norwich Reptile Shed. That's on YouTube, Instagram. They're my two main sort of things. Got a bit of a Facebook page, but all the updates are generally on Instagram. And then I try and do a video every 2 weeks on YouTube now. It probably will get more when summer kicks in and I'm building more stuff. But at the moment, it's every 2 weeks. And that's Norwich Reptile Shed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on, Jamie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.